Hi, I'd just like to share a bit about bearing fruit for the Lord. I just felt God asking me to share on this. And so Jesus teaches a radical message about fruit. And Jesus teaches radically about most things. So when it comes to fruit, he had a very radical message. And so I just want to read from John chapter 15 verse 4. Live in me and I will live in you. A branch cannot bear fruit by itself. It has to stay attached to the vine. In the same way, you cannot produce fruit unless you live in me. In John 15:5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who live in me while I live in them will produce a lot of fruit. But you can't produce anything without me. So the word abide or live is basically just that. We desire to bear fruit because we are children of God, and God has placed it in us to want to be fruitful. Life is full of challenges, sometimes overwhelming challenges, and if you don't do what we're called to do and bear fruit and bring something positive into other people's lives for the sake of God and affect people's lives positively for the sake of God, those challenges are not really worth it. We're here for the good that we can bring. Especially as children of God, we want to be fruitful, we want to be effective. And so to bear fruit, we have to live in Jesus. We have to, now that word live, it can be explained as abide, continue in, dwell, endure, be present, remain, stand, or tarry, or wait for. So we can bear fruit by spending time with Jesus. We can every day put some time aside and focus on what Jesus has to say for us and commit our lives to Him, the day to Him. And then generally during the day we can ask Him to remind us of something He's saying, listen out for something He's saying, interact with Him, ask Him to open our ears so that when He asks us to do something specific, we can hear it and respond and be fruitful. So fruit grows slowly. On a tree, I like the way Jesus used the picture of a vine bearing fruit. The fruit starts off very small, tiny, you can't even see it, and then over time it develops. So we need to be patient with ourselves, and as we remain in Christ and as we grow in Christ and spend time with Him, the Spirit of God in us brings about fruitfulness through relationship. So just as a natural fruit starts off minute and ends up large and gets ripe and is able to be eaten, just the same way our fruit, our spiritual fruit, the work that we do, starts very small. It's got to start somewhere, so it starts small. The principle is that if something is small, it's okay. It's okay to have small fruit, but that fruit should grow. If there isn't a growing process, then there's something wrong. So we need to be consistent in abiding in Christ, building a relationship with Christ, and the fruit will grow over time. So don't be condemned if your fruit is still small and green. The principle is that God will be happy with that as long as there's growth, as long as every day the fruit grows and every day the you become more effective. So if you take the example of a baby, baby can't do anything, lies on its back, cries, needs milk, needs nurture, and it develops every day, it grows, and one day it'll come to a point where it crawls, next, and then another stage it'll actually walk, and it'll take one step and fall down. The fact that it falls down is fine, it's normal, as long as there was development and growth. But if a child doesn't develop and a child ends up being 20 years old and is still taking one step, well, that's a problem. So I think it's the same with us in the Spirit, that our effectiveness and our fruit grows over time. Now I just want to read John 15:1-6. Then Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father takes care of the vineyard. He removes every one of my branches that doesn't produce fruit. He also prunes every branch that does produce fruit to make it produce more fruit. You are already clean because of what I have told you. Live in me and I will live in you. A branch cannot produce any fruit by itself. It has to stay attached to the vine. In the same way, you cannot produce fruit unless you live in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who live in me while I live in them will produce a lot of fruit. But you can't produce anything without me. Whoever doesn't live in me is thrown away like a branch and dries up. Branches like this are gathered, thrown into a fire and burned. So there's a serious edge to this, because if there's a relationship, if you have a relationship, if you're born again, you will want to bear fruit. And if you don't ever bear fruit, you are actually technically not saved. Because if you're alive, if your spirit is alive, if you are healthy and you are a son, then there will be growth through relationship. And there's a serious edge to it, because if there's no fruit, it means that you're not saved, and it means that you will be cast out to outer darkness, hell, in other words. There's that story of Jesus and the fig tree. When he came past the fig tree, he was hungry and he looked for fruit, and he found nothing but leaves, and he proceeded to curse the fig tree, and the disciples noticed it, and then the next day they commented and said that the fig tree dried up very quickly. And when Jesus cursed it, he said, may no fruit ever grow on you again. So that's a serious picture of when God comes to look for fruit in us. Will there be fruit? Will there be something that he can take and use for his kingdom? And as I said, fruit has got different stages. If Jesus had seen maybe young figs or green figs, I don't think he would have cursed it. He would have maybe encouraged it and said, you're doing well, keep going. But there was no fruit, there was only leaves. And I don't know whether it was time of fruit or not, but that is a picture, clear picture of how God looks for fruit and how important it is that we have fruit. John chapter 15 verse 7 says, if you live in me and what I say lives in you, then ask for anything you want and it will be yours. And verse 8 says, you give glory to my Father when you produce a lot of fruit, and therefore show that you are my disciples. So you are showing God, you are showing the world that you are a disciple of Christ when you bear fruit. So this is a typically serious message that Jesus brought, that we need to constantly be growing and exercising the giftings, talents that God has given us, whatever that is. I can't prescribe what the fruit is that you particularly will bear, but it'll involve other people. It'll involve unbelievers and believers. It'll involve living a good testimony out before the world and bringing the good news to unbelievers in whatever way or form that takes for you, and then meeting the needs of people, loving people, and meeting their needs because you love them and you have compassion for them and you don't want them to go to hell. So thank you for listening, spending the time, and I pray that God would bless you, encourage you, that it would be not a condemnation but a conviction that we need to get back into growing fruitfully, growing fruit for God, growing more effective, and seeing God touching people and blessing people and the kingdom expanding. Thank you very much. God bless. Bye.